Can't get enough of Kelly and Ramya?
We're now on YouTube for you to indulge in highlights from our show.
Lucia, welcome to the show. Really glad to be chatting with you for the first time here myself. But me and Ramya are looking forward to this one. And it's intriguing, the subject, because today we're talking with you about what kids wish their parents knew.
Yeah. Hi, Grant. Nice to be here with you. Yes, absolutely. So I thought about what to talk about during this segment, and I was thinking over my career as a classroom teacher, itinerant vision teacher, and now when I do some coaching, and the same concepts kept coming over and over to my mind. And that was that whether a child was young or older and, even into adulthood, the things that they were saying that they really wish their parents knew was that they wish that they would be better listeners, communicate better, and also respect them a little bit more.
So let's kind of delve into each of those. First of all, listening. Can you explain exactly what you mean by that?
Yeah, so most of the kids were talking about they wish that when they spoke, their parents would really hear what they were saying, not hear what they thought they were saying or hear what they wanted to hear, but listening to the words of the child and then also not dismiss what they're talking about. So sometimes, for a child, a conversation was really serious and their parents seemed to dismiss it as something that they could talk about later. And then that later either didn't happen or it didn't happen in the same way. And so the child wasn't as open later on. So basically, it's like when your child is willing to talk, I strongly suggest we sit down and we listen carefully.
Yeah, I remember reading something, and I don't know exactly what ages we're referring to, whether sort of adolescents count or just more young children. But I remember reading something about all the stuff that adults tease kids about, like their first crush or their whatever their playtime not working out. But for a kid, you have the same feelings, if not more intense, as an adult would have about a similar subject, which can feel really just bewildering and betraying to be teased.
Yeah, I you know what? I get that. It's almost like we forget as adults that not only are our children sensitive, but that they do have the same feelings as we do as an adult. And I like that you said, Grant, maybe more so because they're much more sensitive. I think it's that innocence and that rawness and the newness to a lot of experiences that make it that way.
Yeah. It's true too that we sometimes feel like we push people, and this is not just parents and children, but in dynamics, we push people to communicate in ways that we want to understand them, and a lot of that times that can be verbal, it can be just communication styles, but it's often probably a good idea, as you said, Lucia, to just listen to how people are communicating with us. And with children, verbal is sometimes the weakest point of communication, but there's so many other aspects that we can pay attention to, literally just start paying attention to as communication.
Yes, absolutely. So not only do we listen to what a child is actually saying, but then we can listen to, and I'll put it in quotes, nonverbal cues. And for me, when I think of nonverbal cues, I mean has your child changed in some way? For example, has their personality changed? Have their sleep patterns changed? Their eating habits, their interests? Has something... And it can be a small change or it can be a number of changes combined. And that usually will indicate that something is amiss. I know we've had this conversation before when we've talked about either bullying or a child being depressed or anxious, and we can look for these changes. But I remember I'll speak from experience. For me, one of my children had the change of they were fine sleeping in the dark, and then all of a sudden they needed the light on.
Right.
And so we had to explore that. And there was a deeper meaning to that.
Yeah, it's like when a kid suddenly doesn't want to eat, their favorite meal. They're like, I'm not hungry. And it's like, oh, cool. You don't want your dessert? Okay, that's fine. But like there also could be, some underlying, maybe they're being bullied.
Yes.
Or
Yeah.
it's even hard sometimes to articulate the difference between sort of like I'm mad and I'm
Yes.
hurting, when
Yes.
you're young. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And I love that, as young children don't have the language to be as articulate as we do as adults. But then also an older child, if we're not taking the time to really have those conversations and listen attentively when they are communicating with us, they might find it challenging to then later on express themselves when something is not quite right and perhaps they need our guidance.
Oh, yeah. Like with so many other things you've pointed out during these segments, we have to set up the environment, set up that safe space, that brave space for people, for children to come to parents when things are happening, and not just now that it's happening, be like, uh-oh, how do we deal with this? Lucia, what kinds of things are children referring to when we're talking about communication?
Oh, I love that one because it took me by surprise at times. And really, they were talking about communicate. I'll be specific to my students who were either blind or had low vision. And they really wanted to know what was going on around them and wanted to know with accuracy, detail, and the intention of the parent making certain that they were sharing that information. And I thought that was a big one for us to talk about.
That is a huge one. I mean, obviously, because we're missing so many visual cues growing up, and a lot of what people pick up on average is an able-bodied person or a person without vision impairment is visual. You just copy, you mirror, and whether it's just us walking around in this world or the way we want to understand the world as it is, it's all description at the end of the day.
It is. And one of the things that was very specific is that, I found children really didn't like the fact that they didn't know who was present.
Oh, yeah.
They liked to know the number, right? Okay, thank you. The number of people present, male, female, how they identified, their ages, what they were all doing, like were they standing, were they sitting, were they near, were they far away, as much detail as you can possibly provide as a parent to your child. I think they would really appreciate that. And that's that was a major one, even in school. What do you two think?
Well, I certainly think I've had that situation where, someone will tell me afterwards, oh, when I was a kid, obviously, people would tell me, oh, this kid was like really wanting to play with you, kind of like staring at you, like watching you all the time, but, was maybe too shy to say something. I'm like, oh, I would have loved, the teacher, whatever, to, give me some cue. And the opposite too, where you're trying to engage when someone is just not interested and trying to walk away. So definitely those visual cues and context can be incredibly helpful to have.
Absolutely. Those social cues, right? Sorry.
No. Yeah, go ahead. And I'll let Ramya comment as well before we move on to you.
Go ahead, Ramya.
Oh, thank you. I think that we should get to this point because this is something that for some reason, my reaction to it over the years has been maybe a little less than ideal. But joking around and humor, Lucia, there's again that nonverbal or that understanding of sarcasm or all these other things that come up that honestly sometimes just need to be put outright into words to understand what's going on with humor around you.
Yes, absolutely. And I think as sighted people, we really lose that nuance of what it's like not to know, one, who's being spoken to, right? And then the other one is those facial expressions, because sometimes a person might say a joke and they're using their normal tone.
Exactly.
But their expression is what is giving you that cue that they're fooling around or playing with you or making a joke. And as an educator, I found that to be, for myself, never mind my students, frustrating. And so I would say to adults out there and educators and parents, name the person that you're speaking to, say that person's name first, and then also make certain that you start off the conversation. You might think that it's not helpful to your joke, but you must start out that sentence by saying, this is a joke, or I'm just kidding around, so that the person that you're speaking to, who's perhaps not sighted, will understand and not miss that visual cue.
And this is one again where jokes at home, the way that your parents joke with you, the way that you joke, like the dynamic you have with your siblings, can be so drastically different from what comes at you at school or at work, or just different kinds of people, right? And different comparisons of attitudes towards humor. So yeah, it can be quite the deal without even being prepared for it.
Yeah, it's really challenging. Sorry, Grant, go ahead.
No, yeah, I'll say. Wondering if we can talk about other things related to respect. I read something so interesting online where literally someone's like 2-year-old was talking and somebody interrupted her and she said, please don't interrupt me.
Oh, nice.
And the person was so proud of her, because we're so often told to just shut up. The older people's opinions matter, whatever. Can you talk a little bit about that respect that kids are asking for?
Absolutely. And so that is one of the things, is like, allow the child to have the time to speak and say what they need to say. And it's respecting when a child is speaking, but then also respect for their choices. And, kids would often complain that adults don't respect their either interests or what they have to say, comments about friends, things like that. And they're I'll put it in conjunction with taking a child's opinions also seriously. So it's more that let's go beyond listening, beyond respecting, by allowing the child to finish that conversation and truly listening to what they're saying and then respond to it, but respect them enough to take them seriously when they're making comments, whether that comment be positive, negative, or it's about an interest that they have that they want to pursue in life.
Yeah, and I think this comes with, again, all these nuances, right, Lucia? Because it's so easy to feel like we know better because we're adults. And that's often not the case. And especially if you're actually listening, you're not necessarily listening to advise or listening to prove your kid wrong or whatever. You're actually just listening to listen. And that intention alone is something that I think is important. We need to practice.
Yeah. So I think if we kind of put them together and think that, as we're listening, to be able to be much more effective communicators with our children, we want to know and to have them know that we respect what they have to say, who they are, and then, continue that conversation in a relaxed way.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting to have like an actions-based approach to, hey, instead of thoughts. Like you don't have to be sorry for something. You don't have to like somebody. You don't have to change your thoughts. You just have to be nice to that with your behavior, maybe to someone, but you don't have to feel happy about, doing it necessarily, or say like, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. That's a nice point. Good point to make. And that goes in respecting what a child has to say about other people. I know that we'll extend respect for a child's personal space, right? Like I know, I'll say in the olden days, it was typical for a parent to say to a child, oh, go give a hug and a kiss to so-and-so.
Oh God, yeah.
But I know that when my children, right, were young, and people would say that, or someone would expect them to, my words were, no, I'm sorry, we don't do that in our home, especially if the child doesn't know that the other person. And then I would say, a hug and a kiss is reserved for people that we know, and when my child chooses to do so. I think that's really important, respecting personal space. Sorry?
Yeah, and just when your child wants to do it, if they're,
Yes.
stressed out, if they're, they've just kind of had a timeout, whatever. And now you've got to hug
Yeah.
your crazy
Yeah.
uncle. Like, no,
Yeah.
like absolutely not. Um,
Absolutely.
you know what? This is an incredibly fascinating chat. And I actually have, honestly, a lot. It seems like our latest generation is learning so many new like virtues raised by different techniques. Really gives us some hope for them.
Thanks for watching.
You can catch Kelly and Ramya weekdays from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern on AMI.